Sony and PlayStation. This two-car train was making a massive impression throughout the mid to late 90s and the early to mid 2000s. In many ways, their biggest target was Nintendo, by trying to innovate, expand, and redefine what the home console can do. But in order to compete with Nintendo, the PlayStation needed its own roster of exclusive mascots. By the time the PS2 was out, Sony definitely had an impressive lineup. Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, the Hellghast from Killzone, Crash Bandicoot, Parappa the Rapper, Snake, Colossus, Apes, Kratos, and yeah, I'm not familiar with that one either, but the point remains that Sony was swinging with a hard lineup of memorable and unique characters to lead the charge on what would become one of the most popular consoles of all time. And in that list, there was Sucker Punch's Sly Cooper. If you grew up on a PS2, you know of this raccoon, small turtle, and fat pink hippo. The Sly franchise was massively popular for the system, featuring 3 games that even to this day are recognized as beloved classics. Unfortunately, the year is 2021, and nowadays, the Cooper gang is almost a distant memory. And if you look at the franchise's history in the previous decade, it's clear why there has been absolutely no word on what's next for the franchise. Like most convoluted stories, it's best to start from the beginning. Before making games like Infamous, Sly, and Ghost of Tsushima, Sucker Punch was known for this. Yup, this was the first game that Sucker Punch ever developed. Sadly, I'm not going to run out and buy an N64 and find a copy of Rocket Robot on Wheels, so I'm going to blatantly cheat and watch Nitro Rad's video on it. However, from just watching the gameplay, you can see a lot of what would be brought in from this to Sly Cooper. The solid feeling platforming, swinging, carrying certain objects, art style, an interesting world set the foundation of what kind of games Sucker Punch wanted to make. It wasn't a popular game though. Critics loved it, people forgot about it, so it sold poorly. The other major issue for the studio at the time was publishing. Being a new studio with only 17 people behind it, they reached out to nearly every single potential publisher for Robot. They tried to go for Activision and Acclaim, and neither wanted it. They tried to go with Sony, but was rejected since the game was made on the N64. They nearly got one with THQ, but the deal fell apart only a few weeks before E3 1999. EA was more than happy to sign a deal with the studio, but demanded that Rocket be cancelled. Finally, Ubisoft decided to publish the game. Man, times have changed. For their next game, Sucker Punch wanted to make another character-driven action platformer. And so, they began to concept Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, with the original goal of making a raccoon thief as the protagonist. Why? Because according to Brian Fleming, one of the studio's founders, quote, "The sight gag of a raccoon putting on a mask somehow seems super funny to us." Okay, tangent time. I've been reading the Wikipedia page for Sucker Punch for a resource, and what I've learned so far is that these guys are just a bunch of lovable jokesters, the ones that crack up from whoopee cushions and fake vomit. The kind of guys who take their girlfriends to Pier 39 in San Francisco, not because of the restaurants or the sea lions or even the aquarium, but for the sole purpose of going to Houdini's magic shop. Here are 2 examples. Internally, Sly's cane design is an insider joke that it looks like a question mark, because Sly was a, quote, raccoon of mystery. The other example is that the only reason Sucker Punch is called Sucker Punch is because Chris Zimmerman was trying to figure out a name for the company at the time, and so he pitched some options to his wife, which she didn't care about, quote, as long as it isn't Sucker Punch. While Sly was still in a conceptual phase of development, Sucker Punch sought out for a publisher first before going deeper. Understanding that the most successful platformers were the ones that were released by console manufacturers, they formed a deal with Sony, and worked hard to develop the game. There was some nervousness about the game's themes though. The team worried that since the game was aimed towards a younger audience, that Sly would promote the idea that stealing was acceptable. Fortunately, the writers thought of this, and resolved it by injecting the idea that Sly was a master thief. A thief that would only steal from other thieves. With hard work, the first of 3 games would launch in September 2002. Compared to the rest of the games, Thievius Raccoonus feels the most traditional in the sense of platformers. There is no real open world, there are no mission markers littered throughout the map, and enemies take only one hit to take out aside from bosses. Despite that, what you do get is a very solid experience. Sucker Punch really went out of their way to make this universe feel special and unique. Sly's sweet but tragic upbringing feels genuine, and his friends feel just as heartwarming. His determination of getting his family's complete book back is a solid motivation. Even the villains have some compelling stories. Mugshot was bullied by his peers and looked to movie gangsters for motivation. Panda King is a talented firework maker but didn't astound the crowds. And Ms. Ruby was into creepy shit but was feared for it. And each of the villains' worlds feel unique to them because of what they did. From the moment Sly hops out of the van for the first time in the Welsh Triangle, you know that Rayleigh has caused considerable damage with his weather machine. Mesa City was once a populated neon Babylon, now under the threat of mob rule. China's high mountain villages are under the threat of an explosive weapons dealer. This is also helped by some incredible voice acting and the cutscenes with Sly's narration.
Mugshot section of the Thievius Raccoonus contain an entry from my gunslinging ancestor, Tennessee Kid Cooper. His specialty was the rail walk and rail slide. Moves perfected through a lifetime of theft in the Old West.
How delightful! We have a guest. The only thing is, I hate unexpected guests!
Now, do me a favor and read me the instructions again.
To landeth safely upon diminutive points, leapeth lively and presseth the triggering device with the round geometrical object emblazoned upon it.
So jump and hit the circle button to land on narrow spots.
That's a rough translation.
Thievius Raccoonus is a non-stop collage of personality, with slight details giving the player so much story. Controlling Sly feels wonderful. The movements through the environments genuinely make Sly feel like a master criminal. Using his family's cane to swing from hooks, dodging lasers and spotlights, hugging onto pipes and shimmying, latching on from pipe to pipe. It feels very gratifying to move throughout these complex and wonderfully designed levels, all being linked simply by jumping and hitting the circle button.
Isn't that what I just said?
This could be argued as a simplistic movement system, and it is. But that doesn't deny how gratifying it feels to be able to navigate through these levels. Speaking of the levels, they feel so unique. There is never a moment where you feel like a level feels out of place from the rest of the world. Probably my favorite would be the ones in Mesa City. It has this great feeling of being dilapidated but active. The chase between Sly and Carmelita takes place on gross, old, and run-down buildings and forgotten construction. Mugshot's Casino Resort sticks out like a faux luxurious sore thumb. The other worlds are great too, but Mesa City takes the cake by far. But then again, I'm a sucker for neon. To further complement the levels is some excellent music. It's pretty dated sounding at times, but it conveys each world perfectly. In many ways, Thievius Raccoonus is very aged. there is no health bar. You basically die in one hit unless you have a silver or gold lucky charm. You have a live system as well, where if you run out of lives, you start the level from the very beginning. Models look a little weird. Sly looks fine for the most part, but sometimes he can look a little weird in cutscenes. But he's far from the worst. The worst is Panda King. Good lord, that gob. There is also the issue of pacing. This game is short, very short. You can get through the main game in roughly 4 hours, maybe even faster if you just beeline it. And the special moves that you can acquire are kind of useless. Littered through each level are bottles where if you found all of them, you can open a safe at the end of the level which contains a special move for Sly. These moves, aside from the roll and the invisibility upgrade, are pretty useless. However, finishing them also grants access to time trials, which if completed, you can get the dev commentary for each level, which in itself is entertaining to listen to. I don't know why, but they sound stoned as shit.
You may be saying this level is large, but it is actually a third of the size of the original level.
The original concept behind the original NPCs was to tie them to Alice in Wonderland.
What was challenging in lighting this level, okay? You have fire in here, you have multi-levels, you have lasers. Yep.
Okay, the hardest thing for this level was the you have two different kind of a set of moves. One is very cold. You start with cold, and at the end you get hot. So we have like we can only use one fog in this level, actually for every level.
There are other annoyances too. Enemies all die in one hit and having fairly easy to dodge attacks aside from flashlight guards. Jumping and hitting the circle button sometimes latches you onto the wrong thing. Some of these time trials are absolute bullshit, and the turret sections are, well, thankfully there are only 3 of them, but they're still very boring. For a while, I thought that Thievius Raccoonus was the weaker of the original 3, but my perspective has changed quite dramatically. Yeah, this is shorter and simpler and more bare bones, but it does feature some of the most memorable and best levels in the franchise. This isn't necessarily a knock on the other 2 games. All 3 are great, but Thievius Raccoonus is a more solid experience level-wise. With the success of the first game, Sucker Punch immediately worked on the second, and things were going to be dramatically different. The goal for 2 was to have elaborate style heists. Many little jobs build up into one grand heist. This would require a whole new kind of Sly game. Gone will be the old AI, map design, and overall layout. A whole new system would be implemented, all in time for September of 2004. Sly 2 might start the same as the first, with a robbery and grand chase scene from Inspector Carmelita Fox and the police, but from there, the game is a whole lot different. Sly moves, well, Sly. Pushing the stick all the way forward doesn't bring him to a full sprint anymore. Rather, a sneaky and silent walk. Flashlight guards look bigger and meaner than before, and Bentley is now on the field. And to top it all off, an old threat has returned in a more horrifying fashion. Sly 2 hints at being not only a grander story, but in some cases, more trying and darker moments for the Cooper gang. Sly 2 goes for a completely different playstyle compared to Thievius Raccoonus. Rather than work your way through multiple levels in a world, now each episode takes place in its own open world. Each world featuring interesting and unique enemies and elements that create a new level of challenge. You can now pickpocket from enemies, which feels gratifying to pull off, and each character feels specialized for certain tasks. Sly might be the all-rounder, but being the master thief he is, he can perform his signature moves to get to better heights and places. Plus, he is the only one that can pickpocket. Murray is tough and can take on large swarms of enemies with ease. He can even pick up things and enemies and throw them for massive destruction. And Bentley is weak in fights, but he has his trusty sleep dart crossbow and bombs to shake up the guards. He also hacks computers by having this classic top-down tank thing navigate through levels fighting off the computer's defenses. They're short and limited to missions, but they still are a nice break from the main gameplay. Hazards have changed a little bit from the last game as well. Gone are the same alarm systems where you navigate through lasers and searchlights just to smash a device at the end to shut them down. Lasers will burn you as soon as you touch them, and walking under searchlights activates a turret that will shoot on sight. There are 3 kinds of guards per level, a flashlight and 2 light guards. While the flashlight guards tend to work the same, the light guards can chase down the gang with ease. They can also jump up to rooftops and call in other guards. Not gonna lie, there is actually a great fun factor when you get into a large chase with the guards and even get into a fight. Another major step up was in the art department. The characters look more comic book rather than cartoon. They even have these jagged movements while speaking to give a sensation of different panels seen in comics. Little details in the binocucom make the device pop more. Each character has their own style of binocucom to match themselves. And these locales, they are fantastic. Paris is beautifully lit by the moonlight and gives a moody feel. Rajan's palace in India is a grand and opulent gem just being on the edge of a large rainforest. And Prague. This is by far the best part in this game. This part of the game creeped me the fuck out when I was younger, and it still does to an extent. Whoever led the design must have watched the fuck out of every Tim Burton movie, listened to Mr. Crowley on constant repeat, and had at least 7 pet tarantulas. Which would make sense because the Contessa is literally a spider. On the music side of things, Peter McConnell returns to give the score a familiar but massive upgrade. By far one of the biggest changes is to the story. The first game's story was great, but this one really pushes the characters to their limits. There are times where I felt pretty bad for the gang. When Bentley manages to avoid Neela's betrayal, you can really hear the somber in Matt Olson's voice.
While intellectually inferior, Sly and Murray had always been a rich source of sociological interest. The long walk out of the jungle gave me time to reflect, and with each passing step, my sense of isolation grew.
Or when Sly monologues his frustration losing all the clockwork parts thanks to Jean Bisson.
Looking around the inside of the battery, I knew we all felt it. Failure. I was twitchy and ready for action. Any action. Bentley tried to make some sense of the situation by drawing up meaningless plans. But Murray took it the worst. He just sat there sobbing while the team van floated away over the horizon. That van was his life. I knew I'd have to find a way to make it up to him.
It even ends on a very low note with Bentley paralyzed, Murray feeling like it was all his fault, and Sly having to turn himself in to save his friends. Of the games that exist in the franchise at the moment, this one has to be my favorite story. The urgency and fear of a reborn Clockwork on top of tribulations with the Cooper gang is a great mixture, followed with the memorable villains within the Claw gang. While advancements were made to the story and game mechanics, gameplay is where the second game somewhat struggles. Each character has special moves that they can buy and equip, and are unique to that character. The problem for me is that there really isn't a need for these moves, aside from a couple that you have to get in order to progress through the story. Some of them are fun, like Sly's Paraglide or Bentley's Jump Pack, but a lot of these you don't even use, let alone need. I never use the charge attack with Sly because you have to swing Sly's cane first and continue holding square where Sly stands still, unmovable, and then letting go sends him spinning. It's so counterintuitive. And with the return of bottles means the return of safes, which means the return of moves you won't use. Unless you want 100% this game, going after the bottles is as pointless as last time. Another issue I have is with the level design. I love these levels on a visual spectacle, but playing them is a mixed bag. Some feel really cool to explore, while others feel barren. Granted, Dimitri's nightclub is an introductory level, but sometimes the other levels, like the Palace in Canada, feel so empty and stunted. I really like levels that take advantage of height, such as the Contessa's estate or the Indian jungle. But as for the others, they feel half-baked. There is a reason for this, and that is because Bentley and Murray are playable characters. Which is fine, but one of the best things about Sly Cooper is his freedom of movement capabilities. I feel that Sucker Punch designed some of the maps in Band of Thieves to complement Bentley and Murray more rather than Sly. Sly 2 might be flawed to an extent, but it's still a solid game. It might be easy and lacking some improvements, but it's still a very fun and very gratifying experience. At the time, it was well received and was beloved publicly, leading a way for the third game. Unlike Band of Thieves, where Sucker Punch had at least 2 years of time to develop, Honor Among Thieves was being developed at the exact same time as the second game. There isn't much information to go on, but Brian Fleming does hint in this interview that the development of both games was rough.
Well, Sly 3 was the shortest game we ever made. We made that game in under 12 months from start to finish. So Sly 3, we were rushing, number one, and we were growing at the same time. So it was a real challenge for us.
Amazingly, the third and final Sly Cooper game for Sucker Punch would launch on time in September 2005. Honor Among Thieves in many ways feels like a step up. Better platforming compared to the second game is immediately noticeable. One of the issues I took with the former game was that it seemed like the platforming was lessened. Not completely ignored or forgotten, but lessened. 3 makes a return to maps where Sly can climb, jump, shimmy, spire jump, and all of the classics, but the maps also complement Bentley and Murray as well, striking a perfect balance for all characters. There seems to be an upgrade in the design department as well. Colors pop out a whole lot more. Look at Sly, for example. His blue shirt is so blue. Compared to Band of Thieves, Honor Among Thieves feels so much more vivid and alive in comparison. Maps finally go in the right direction too, where there are height differences in buildings, mountain ranges, and so on. They also feature their own unique style of hazards. Holland has a bloodthirsty wolf, Venice has non-stop gondolas and boats to hop on, and the Caribbean has lizards, as well as a bunch more, but we'll get to that. The trio feels more unique than ever. One of the most major changes is with Bentley. You might think at first he's more limited because of his wheelchair. You're forgetting he's Bentley. He has kitted his chair out with gadgets and devices that make him pretty versatile. He has a triple jump allowing him to cover vast distances. He has his bombs and darts, and he can even pickpocket. Murray, on the other hand, hasn't had too much of a change, but he can shake out coins and items from guards' pockets. As the title hints at, now there are a new set of characters to play as. You have the Guru, an Australian mystic that can take control of guards and hide in plain sight. Then there's Penelope, who is an RC specialist with her toy helicopter that can rip off turrets off of tanks, and an RC car that shoots explosive shots. Then Panda King returns from the first game. He has his slow but destructive melee attacks, but his real bread and butter is his fireworks, acting like a multi-target artillery piece. And lastly, making his return is Dimitri. He acts as a deep diving expert. He can go underwater with his harpoon gun to collect treasures in deep water full of dangerous creatures. Light guards have also gotten a major rework. Each level's light guards feel unique to their world. For example, in Australia, the kangaroos throw smoke bombs to blind you. The pigs in Holland can throw projectiles and even light a gasoline puddle on fire. The pirate golden retrievers can block your attack. And all of the light guards have the ability to jump and dodge attacks appropriately. Finally, there are a new set of side games that have been thrown into the mix. Gondola shootouts, dogfights, and even pirate ship battles that nearly feel similar to the pirate ship mechanics found in Assassin's Creed 4. These pirate ship battles, despite their overt simplicity, are actually kind of fun. You steer the ship using L2 and R2, account for wind direction, and you line up for a broadside attack. It's actually quite fun, even boarding the the enemy ship and fighting their captain. You can even partake in treasure hunting quests where you have to follow the clues right where X marks the spot. And to top all of this, you have Peter McConnell's score taking center stage. Sly 3 looks better, plays better, and has more content. And it is also the weakest of the original trilogy. Honor Among Thieves was rushed, and sadly it feels that way, because this game feels significantly shorter than the second game. I haven't played this game in roughly 15 plus years, and while I still enjoyed my time, I can definitely tell that this game is far easier, with its challenge coming in small bursts. Sometimes that challenge is being pure bullshit. That moment in the last episode where you play as Dimitri getting Sly's cane, yeah, fuck that one in particular. There also isn't much to do after you complete the main game. Gone are the bottles, which might be a good or bad thing depending on who you ask. There's time trials that you can do, and there's even 1v1 local multiplayer modes, which is fine, but not really something that people want to do. But I think by far the weakest part is this game's story. Now granted, Sucker Crunch was working overtime to get 2 major games out on a back-to-back year schedule. And it had to be on the PS2 because 1, they were already in the middle of production, and 2, they knew that Sony was about to launch their next console, so it had to be on the PS2 before the PS3 launched. This combination of stressors visibly shows. Sly 2's story is great, despite the cut Monaco level. Sly 3's is good, better compared to what's to come. We'll get to it. But 3 staggers on a few points. The idea of a Cooper vault is a pretty great one. A collection of wealth passed down generation to generation, only accessible to the Cooper family. What's annoying is that Sly only learns from it not from his father, nor the Thievius raccoonus, but from some guy. Yeah, your dad has this vault, it's here, see ya. Why? McSweeney's role is so confusing to me. It really feels like it was just thrown in. Now granted, I know it's because Dr. M was a part of Sly's father's gang, but it feels so forced. Oh, Sly has this gang, we need his father to have a gang and have this tie into the idea that maybe his friends are just pawns. Especially the fact that since the first game, the Thievius raccoonus records everything about the Cooper gang. Wouldn't the vault be mentioned or even hinted at once? Like it could have been a pictogram puzzle that Sly might have overlooked while reading and Bentley so happened to spot it one day while looking at it. Or if Bentley found some sort of code while flipping through the pages. Those would have been more genuine and believable stories rather than a no-name random character that the audience has just been introduced to having knowledge of this vault. So if I were writing the story to Sly 3, what would I do about Dr. M? Easy! I would just make him some guy. Dr. M can still be in the game since I enjoy his character quite a lot, but have him be someone not affiliated in a major way with the Coopers. He could have just been a stalker to Sly's father and learned about the vault that way. Maybe he was an adventurer and just so happened to find Cane Island. It would have made his character a lot more tangible. I also have an issue with the villains. What made the Fiendish Five and Claw Gang so evil was that they were a group of people with a set goal. Sly 3's villains just feel boring because they aren't all connected and they aren't set out on harming the Coopers. Yes, they're doing criminal actions like Don Octavius flooding Venice with tar or Black Baron rigging the results of the Aces competition in his favor, but because they're independent from one another, they lack the global threat style tension from the previous 2. Sly 3 is good. It's a good send-off for Sucker Punch's main franchise. But by this time, they were done making Sly games. They wanted to move on to make a new IP with more mature themes, a bigger world, and new mechanics to take full advantage of the all-new PS3 that didn't aim towards kids and furries. 2009's Infamous was a mega hit and solidified the exclusive relationship the company had with Sony. But due to the ending of Sly 3, fans wanted the next major Sly Cooper on Sony's shiny next-gen console. Hell, Infamous featured Easter eggs hinting at a new Sly game. There isn't much info I can find on the development process on Thieves in Time, aside from the obvious. Sucker Punch was working hard on Infamous 2 and Second Son, so Sony decided to hand the Sly 4 project to Sanzaru Games. After proving their worth and even getting Sucker Punch's blessing, Sanzaru was tasked in making the fourth Sly Cooper game, with Glenn Egan taking the executive producer role. Aside from Peter McConnell returning for the score and some of the original voice actors from previous games, the team behind Sly 4 were all new. Now, while I haven't interacted with him, from his interviews at least, Egan looks like he's genuine when he says that he too is a fan of this franchise. I'm sure it is true. However, he was the one in charge of this project, and there are quite a lot of criticisms I have for him and his team on this game. It's time to dust off the PS3 and return to Sly 4 for the first time since 2013. Remember how I preluded to the Battlefield 5 video by declaring how much I hated it? I think this should have taken its place instead. I remember when I originally played Thieves in Time back in 2013, I felt something was off about it. There was a lack of excitement. That moment after I finished the game, I didn't feel satisfied, but confused. And now that I have the power of age, hindsight, and some level of awareness, I can see that this game is what it is. A mess. Sly 4 is frustrating on so many levels. Literally. Not because it's hard, but because it's so painfully average it hurts. And what really hurts is that the very first level that takes place in feudal Japan starts off so strong. But as this game goes on, I was forcing myself to find some commodity of enjoyment. There are some good things. The platforming is actually some of the best in the series, there is some gorgeous map design, and the game proudly displays its cross-save capabilities with the Vita version. Which, by the way, good luck on getting that. And I also like the costumes. Rather than being used solely for disguise and passwords like in Honor, Thieves in Time has the costumes have specific uses. The armor is able to deflect projectiles, or the archer being able to shoot a bow and arrow with rope attached to it. And I'm really happy not only to see the original 3 voice actors return for their roles, but Phil McConnell's return to produce an excellent score. But there is so much more wrong. The movement, for example, feels weird. While there are some things I like, such as the new platforming introduced through Sly's ancestors, or how Bentley performs a little drift when turning at high speeds, there's something clunky overall feeling about it. Landing from heights, for example. When you land with any of the characters, time slows down and you can't move for about half a second. This might seem like a small gripe, but trust me, when you're playing, you notice it, and it takes away all momentum. I also noticed that latching onto things like pipes and rope is more unpredictable than before, and there are times where I swear I'll hit a button and I just get no response. Like I'll try to jump to a new platform, so I press X and I get nothing in return. Then there is the animation and art direction. I personally love the older art direction. Thick outlines, more angular shapes, and a more comic book or even graphic novel style. Sanzaru instead went for this cartoon look, and at times it looks decent at best and disturbing at worst. I think for the most part, the characters in the cutscenes look fine. I think they lost the grit when they went for this brighter, vivid color look, and the fact that this is very obviously animated on Flash in a bad way. But whatever, fine, it's fine. In game though, well, here's the thing. Murray actually looks the best here. He looks exactly how I thought he would look on a modern system. Bentley looks okay. Aside from his lack of eyeballs and his creepy new bird beak mouth, he looks fine. Sly though, looks kinda crappy, to be honest. He's got this three-pronged face look that doesn't remind me of him at all. Probably because he looks more cartoony in the cutscenes. So the artist needed to translate this into a 3D model, and it just looks very off. But by far, the one who got it the worst was Carmelita. What the fuck am I looking at? She looks more like an anorexic meth head. I can see her rib cage. But those are just nitpicks. My critiques can be written off as little things. No, the biggest issue with this game is this story and writing. If you are annoyed with McSweeney and Sly 3, you are going to go absolutely mad in Sly 4. As the name implies, the story focuses on time travel. Having time travel being a massive element in a plot can make said plot and its events tricky to write. Back to the Future is probably one of the best examples of how to write a plot revolving around time travel, because Robert Zemeckis accounts for any little change in the past means drastic consequences for the future. Thieves in Time is very agonizing to think about when it comes to its rules with time. For example, the 10,000 BC level with Bob Cooper. There are all of these machines that are moving around the eggs. I'm not claiming to be a master at quantum physics, but wouldn't those machines have an effect on the space-time continuum? Wouldn't the cavemen start making their own machines and advance society by thousands of years ahead of schedule? Or what about medieval England? All those cyborg werewolf dogs. Wouldn't that seriously cause major damage in the future? How about the biggest plot hole? Why doesn't Le Paradox just do this? I need to step away from the time travel because the writing gets even worse amazingly. We need to talk about Penelope. This game ruined this character. Not only does she betray Bentley and the gang in the worst way, but her reasoning behind it is even more dumb.
Why? For you, of course! I had to make you see how things could be!
I'm not going to be one of the bad guys, Penelope!
Huh, bad guys? That's kind of funny, Bentley, seeing as how you work for a thief. But you know the most valuable thing Sly ever stole? Your potential! Together, we could change the world, but you're still chasing after honor for chump change. When are you gonna wake up?
So you sold out to Le Paradox for the money?
No, you're not listening. He's just a means to an end.
Wow. And I thought you were smart.
Penelope originally snuck into the Aces competition because of her young age, not because of some employer paying her to do so. Also, I'm fairly certain she had a small crush on Sly, so why would she go out of her way to ruin his life? She wanted Raccoon Tail but settled with Turtle Tail instead? But here's something I really want to ask. Do you remember where Bentley found Penelope? Unfortunately, there is still even more to criticize. I think the villains are decent. I like Miss Decibel, but Toothpick is meh, Grizz is just a shitty version of Dimitri, El Jefe is whatever, and Le Paradox is just an idiot. By the way, you know what's worse than Nolan North doing a shitty Cuban accent?
Ah! I hope you can fly like a pigeon, Cooper! Otherwise, you'll never catch me.
Nolan North doing an even shittier French accent in the same game.
But not this time, I think. Look at this, my marvelous contraption. The time tunnel. Something else I had your little friend Penelope develop before her unfortunate failure.
There's also some really bad humor most of the time. The Carmelita belly dancing scene knows which audience it aims for. I feel gross. I feel fucking gross. All of it to end on a massive cliffhanger. I think the reason why Sly 4 came out as such a mess is because it didn't really age with its audience and technology. What was nice about the original Sly games is that they are a hallmark of the PS2 era. They showed what that console could do at the time, while also featuring well-rounded stories and elements. Thieves in Time feels stuck in the past. The maps are about the same size as they were in the PS2 days. They even lack the height that was seen in 2 and 3. The boss battles all feature the same 3-stage routine except for Miss Decibel. It feels very basic and samey. In the older games, sure, you can easily whack the boss, but you would still have to avoid their attacks or minions. Meanwhile here, it's dodge the attacks, wait for the boss to be disoriented, smack a few times, get pushed back, repeat. But do you know what's the most embarrassing part? Aside from the bad writing, the level design, the lack of any real advancement? The loading screens. There are so many loading screens in this goddamn game. I was beyond perplexed when I rebooted this game for the first time in years as to why the loading screens were not only so numerous, but also of how long they were. I'm going to do a quick test. Here are 4 loading screens from each game. I'm going to put a timer here. Let's see which one loads faster. Ready, set, go. This is a sick joke, right? What kind of bullshit is this? I see no reason whatsoever for these loading screens to be as long as they are. I guarantee you that these loading screens combined would make about an hour and a half of these bullshit screens. Maybe even longer. I need to get off this. I already feel myself going insane. After I beat La Paradox and watched the credits, I turned off the game. Fuck the collectibles. Fuck replaying the main story. Fuck any of the side stuff. Fuck this game. There is one other thing that Sanzaru did with the name before being acquired by Oculus, and that was the remaster of the original games. The Sly collection features the 3 PS2 classics, upscaled and cleaned up for the modern era. There isn't too much to talk about with this, but to keep it short, this is the best way to play the games. All the games run at a constant 60 FPS, are all on the same disc, and retain the same level of control and feeling. It's a good remaster, but it's also weird as fuck. Being that the game runs constantly at 60 FPS, the in-game cutscenes seem a little jumpy. Dialogue feels just a tad sped up, and for some reason they added and cut things from the animated cutscenes. I didn't play too much of the remaster since at this point I was done playing these games, but from what little I saw, there was just some weird choices. For example, smoking is shown in these games, but after the Dimitri heist in Sly 2, Sly mentions that they go to Monaco and show that Bentley is counting cards in the casino in the original. In the remaster, Sanzaru removed this for some reason. Also in Sly 3, when Murray is holding an injured Bentley, I guess this wasn't enough to convey the message. So Sanzaru added this big ink blotch I thought was a glitch. Maybe it was. I was playing this on PS Now. But if not, it's a little weird. Oh, and they removed some of the behind the scenes stuff as well. The one major complaint I have though is that you cannot switch games. There is no option from what I've seen in any of the pause menus where you can go back to the game select screen. Instead, you have to restart the disc completely. Aside from that, it's an alright remaster. The Sly Cooper franchise is beloved by many and missed by most. There look to be big plans. Comics, a TV show, and even a movie being made by the same guys responsible for these. And it actually looked pretty good, except for Murray. Murray looks kind of weird and Kevin Miller isn't voicing Sly, but whatever. The weird part about all of this is that there hasn't been a loss of interest. Fans want another game. Sucker Punch has gone on record saying that they would love to go back to make another Sly Cooper again. The only one who isn't saying anything at this time is the one who is known for currently mistreating their archive. Can Sly come back? Well, that future looks pretty uncertain. And if he did, there would have to be major alterations that would make the mechanics current and interesting. Till then, I'll just go back to the routine where every once in a long while, I go back to a raccoon telling me how his journey began in the first place. This video took too long to make. Sadly, real life doesn't stop for anyone, and some technical issues came in the way as well. One thing I do want to briefly touch on is PS Now, because when it works amazingly well. But it needs so much to catch up. Fix the damn PC app so I have a proper search bar. Let me download games onto my PC rather than just a PS4 or 5. Add in more PS2 games and get some PS1, PSP, and PS Vita shit in there too. Maybe then people will actually flock to this service and not see it as a forgotten joke of cloud gaming.